that you can be incredibly productive without being stressed or pushing yourself. And I think there's a really interesting, like, they tell professional athletes, like Olympic gold medalists, they don't tell them like run 100% flat out 110%. They tell them to run 85%, and that's actually like they run faster when they're trying to run 85% than they do when they're trying to run 100%, which I think is like a insane psychological marvel that probably applies to most of our work and what we're talking about, the trade-offs between stress and pressure and progress and productivity.
Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have Eric Jorgenson on the show. He is the CEO of Scribe Media. He's a podcaster, an angel investor, a best-selling author of one of my favorite books, and probably most of people's that are listening to this favorite book, the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, coming out with a new book very soon as well. And I'm very grateful for your time. And Eric, I'd love to start early on in your journey. I'm curious for you, what are some of the things about your childhood, maybe overlooked things that you didn't know at the time, that have allowed you to step down this path? Because I know that your dad ran a business, your uncle had a pizza joint, you had a lot of going on, but what kind of brought you down this path?
Yeah, I mean, as I sit here, I think the two like defining things were I we were a big reading family, and I read a lot, and I always loved books, and we were an entrepreneurial like small business family, and like I just became CEO of a publishing company. So you can see like how the dots connect and make sense in reverse. But
Yeah.
those were kind of like the two defining things of my childhood. Like I got in trouble for staying up way too late reading books, and I got in trouble for selling candy to kids out of my locker, and that somehow became my career.
It's crazy to know that because for me, I didn't read books growing up. And then when I stepped out of high school was when I started to read books. And
Yeah.
I just dove into them to such an extreme extent that now I'm speaking with the authors that I once was reading their books. So it's like, it's really, really cool to look back on what we've been able to do, because the time to speak with you is something that I love so, so much. Do you think that you recognize that at the time that it was like the entrepreneurial path was going to be something that you wanted to go down, or was that something that you just felt like it was meant to be? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel very lucky that I grew up in a place where it was not where it was normal, right? Like I think for a lot of
Mhm.
people, and a lot of the reason that people consume so much like entrepreneurial content and listen to podcasts and read the books is because it takes a huge like leap of faith to get into that as a
Yeah.
career path and get comfortable taking the risks of hiring people and carrying a payroll or putting your own personal capital at risk, or just even failing publicly, like even the money or the responsibility aside. And I just grew up with like our dinner table conversation was like, shit, payroll is going to be tight this week. And like, third or fourth generation of that. So I feel really lucky that it was kind of normal to me. It doesn't make it not like scary and heavy to do, but it didn't require that sort of inhuman leap of faith that I think some people have to take to go out on their own or to start a business or become, an executive.
Yeah, yeah. I recently had Hassan Kuba on the show. He was a co-author of the Unfair Advantage, and it seems like that was kind of like your unfair advantage was being in that space, so it didn't seem so monstrous to step into that space. I definitely wasn't around any entrepreneur. I'm the first entrepreneur that I know, at least where I live, at least.
Yeah.
What do you wish you developed earlier? Or what do you think that most people get wrong about entrepreneurship that you kind of jumped over that learning curve maybe a little bit easier?
Yeah, well, and this relates to something that's I think important to follow that up with, which is like it's not as scary as it seems. It's a little foreign, but like if you figure out how to stage the risks and sort of step into things like one piece at a time, it's like playing a video game, and like it's not always
Yeah.
obvious how you'll progress. But if you take the next challenge, come around the next corner, like play the puzzle in front of you well, you'll earn something new, whether that's a skill or a connection or some capital, and then you'll get to kind of like go to the next level. So it's not like it's not impossible, and it's not always a huge leap if you can figure out a very small next step to take. Um, I don't know. we are also all very lucky that we can create proximity with the people that we want to be like, right? Like that's what I do when I'm listening to podcasts and reading books. And there's a huge flip, I think, in a lot of people's lives when they realize that a book is not just like a shitty homework assignment, but it's a way to be close to the people that you want to be more like and learn from people that you may not have the privilege to have in your life already. And, nobody's born with the people in their lives necessarily that they want to grow up to be like. So making that decision to select those people and then find, cheap, easy ways to sort of put yourself in proximity with them and learn from them and become them as much as you want or as much as you can, I think is a really helpful thing to just realize what the tools of that trade are and how to do it.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to do it, which is the amazing thing about this world. I mean, I started from listening to podcasts and now having a podcast to speaking with the people that I read their books years ago, and it is really, really, it's an amazing thing. And for you, with even Naval's book, like, you had to synthesize his life and all of his work for like 3 years and bring something that was 600 pages, a lot less. And I don't think a lot of people can understand that amount of effort. I can't even understand that amount of effort that you have to go through to really put that in. I once heard you on a podcast where you spoke about how, like, now when you ask yourself a question or some questions, you'll kind of see it through the lens of what Naval would kind of like the perspective that he would take on it, almost in some sort. What is an overlooked part of that book, or a part that could have been added? As I said, it was 600 pages and you brought it down a lot less. What was cut out that you wish could have been added, or maybe something that resonated a little bit more with you?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much. One of the reasons I loved working on that project was that I was excited to learn what Naval thought about almost every topic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I wanted to hear what he had to say about education and about investing and about startups. And when I sort of made the first version of the manuscript, which was hundreds of pages and very long, and sent it to friends, like, not everybody was interested in all the stuff. And so it was
Mhm.
a process of cutting and trimming and shaping to reach something that was really broadly applicable and timeless and useful for truly, like, I think almost everybody on the planet. Um,
Mhm.
and it's amazing to see how many people from how many different walks of life like that book has affected and resonated with is, I think, shows that we did that well, which wouldn't have happened if we kept in everything that I was interested in. I did put up all of the extra stuff like on the website. So you can go read the
Yeah.
chapters that I cut on education or investing or whatever if you're interested in it. To me, there was one education related sort of thought experiment that I really loved, which is related to the second book as well. Like, you could imagine that existing in either book, but it's about, imagine a perfectly educated population. If everyone on Earth had, a master's or a PhD in software engineering, electrical engineering, physics, like, what would happen? What would get built? How quickly? And how many problems would be solved? And how would the agency change? Um, what would the pace of innovation be like? What things would be scarce and how? And it's not breaking any laws of physics to imagine a perfectly educated population, and you can see how education over a few generations is maybe the single greatest variable to tweak to change the outcome of, like, human civilization at scale. And we're not doing against that. If that's the 100% on the scorecard, like, we're not doing a great job, and there's some ways that we could improve that. And it just opened my eyes to some of those things.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. I was on a podcast earlier today speaking about how I remember I went through school and I learned the Pythagorean theorem about 3 times, and I could not recite what that even is right now. Like, I could, there's what I learned from school and what I learned from reading books are, it's not even close. Like, I truly do not remember really anything, and I'm 20. Like, I don't really remember anything that I learned in school, and I do vividly remember listening to the Almanac when I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods, and I literally for like days, it's all I listened to, and it was like just seeping in my
It's
brain of
awesome.
just like all of the things that it was you spoke about, and you did such a great job at synthesizing it, as you know. But what there's something in both books that you touch on, is like the idea of leverage, and I don't really think people can contextualize it or understand it if they don't understand what leverage is at its basis. So do you mind breaking down what leverage is?
Yeah, I'll do my best. It's a little abstract to your point, but I'll try
Yeah.
to sort of make it concrete and give good examples. I think different examples will resonate with different people based on what they've seen or experienced in their life. So when I say leverage, it is the category of things that are force multipliers, right? A lever in physics, the basic tool, the simple machine that you use is like, I can't go pick up 800 pounds off the ground. But if I have a 10-foot
Mhm.
pole and a rock, I can lift that weight. And that's the kind of obvious physical version of it. The more abstract, to turn that into a ladder of possible tools. Imagine a lumberjack who's like, you're trying to build a fire, you're trying to sell wood, you're trying to collect wood for a house. And then that tool ladder is basically like using your bare hands, using an axe, using a chainsaw, using a tractor. And that's just kind of physical tool leverage. Then you've got another category that is products. So where can you externalize your expertise into code or a podcast? That's
Mhm.
what we're doing right now. It's like creating a product of our minds, of this little digital clone of ourselves that will go off horizontally and into the future to replicate our effort here. And there's incredible leverage in the digital tool world. Then the last two categories are people, which encompasses both like employees and fans and followers and friends, audience, and then capital, money, obviously, but also real estate, physical assets that you have. And the combination of those, any combination of those, is really like what a company is made of. Like those are the building blocks. So if you can become adept at using even one or two, but ideally all four types of leverage, if you can manage people, if you can think critically about how to allocate capital, if you can become a master of the tools in your domain and which ones are good uses of time or money and effort and which ones aren't, and then how to not repeat yourself constantly, how to record your thoughts and your expertise and package that in a way that you're scaling yourself outside of your physical time. That's like the art of using leverage, and that is how you build influence. It's how you build companies. It's how you level up in that like video game that we were talking about, right? And that kind of comes like one skill or one win at a time. But it's helpful. It was really helpful for me to start to think in those terms and see, which of those am I naturally gifted at? Which do I hesitate to do, but I know I need to? Which do I need to really build up my skills in? Which do I put off unless I absolutely have to, right? And making decisions that help you, everyday decisions that help you create more leverage for tomorrow. That's why recording a podcast, I think, is always such a good use of time. Like we're going to spend an hour together, and tens of thousands of people may listen to this over the next 5 years or 10 years that would never have had access to otherwise. It's fascinating. It's counterintuitive. It's easy to underestimate the power of it, I think, because some of these things are so new, or to believe that they're accessible to you, that you can build those skills, that you can hire people, that you can have influence over people. But again, just like take the small next step and start to feel the wind at your back and feel the momentum start to build. And you'll be surprised how quickly your leverage builds up and gets longer, and your ability to, it's really all about changing that effort to impact ratio. Like, what does 1 hour of your time accomplish now? What can it accomplish in a year? With even more leverage, what can it accomplish in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? And some of the most famous people we see, the people we most look up to, the people with the greatest impact, have slowly accrued this incredible leverage that society gives them because we've seen them do good things with the resources that they have over and over and over again. And that's really, I feel like that's the game of life, is like, do the work that's in front of you well, get rewarded with a few more resources, and then do the work on your desk the next day as well as you can, and let the game continue.
Yeah. I think a lot of my life changed when I started to look at life as a game rather than like
Mm-hmm.
a static, this is how life is supposed to be. And then I get to the end of the job I'm supposed to work and I retire kind of perspective.
Yep. Yep.
And looking at it like a game, like I've heard you speak about like Jack Butcher in a lot of episodes where it's like that is just such a tangible idea of what leverage looks like at scale. And to be able to contextualize that, and like you said, be able to recognize that it is possible for you, is something I think is really difficult to internalize when people don't even know. Like you said, it's like the momentum thing, but where do they even start, kind of thing? Like, how do I take what's in my
Yeah.
head or what I think could be valuable to someone else and put it down onto something, or put it in something in some sort? So yeah, how are we able to people to really make that first step? What would you say?
Like how to go from 0 to 1 in that game?
0 to 1. I think that's the first step,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, it's funny when you look at sort of the beginnings of people's careers, like usually like take Jack Butcher or George Mack is another one who's kind of like in our age cohort building awesome stuff. He talks a lot about like making life a video game. And you try to track somebody's
Yeah.
career like that back to the beginning or even mine, and it just gets like it gets really fuzzy because you'll see a bunch of random projects, just a bunch of shit, and you're like, some of this is maybe good, some of it's bad, some of it's the links are broken, like I can't even tell. And you'll see people literally just like fumbling around, like they don't know what's going to hit. They know they need to keep moving. You got to produce something. You got to try stuff. You got to see what hits. And I think that's a really healthy part of the process, right? Like, unless you're born knowing exactly what you want to do, there's always some sort of experimentation. And actually, if it is really clear to you what you want to do, it's probably not that original or that deeply authentic to you. And not everybody has to do something that's like a made up, super creative career path or generate new stuff. If you just want to go be a badass surgeon or a badass engineer, like, that is awesome. We need all of that, and that is a huge contribution to society. Please rock on. But if you are, if you feel more artistic, if you feel more creative, if you feel more entrepreneurial, sometimes even the great scientists turn out to be really creative and multidisciplinary. And it just, a lot of it comes from just doing random shit. You never know what's going to work. You never know what you're going to learn from the different stuff that failed. Like from 17 to 21 or 23, I probably started, it depends how seriously, where the bar is for what counts as a serious attempt, but like somewhere between 5 and 10 medium, like at least half-assed attempts at building a company. I imported bamboo t-shirts from China. I tried to start like a personal finance tutoring company. I tried to start a blogging club. I like actually kind of did start a web design firm, but not really. Like I was blogging, but like not on any blog that anybody would be able to find anymore because they all like got defunct. So it's really like, you won't know what'll take you 0 to 1 until you've done a handful of random things and one has just like popped and you're like, oh, that worked. It didn't work as much as I wanted it to. Maybe it didn't work in the way that I thought it was going to, but like I went from 0 to 1 somehow. And now I'll figure out how to try to get to 2, whether it's with this thing or what I learned from this thing, even though I'm throwing that, all of that actual specific project away.
Yeah, no, it's very valuable. I think the belief that holds people back is that if I do something, it's a wasted time of some sort. Like
Mhm.
if I fail at this, it's wasted time, but the wasted time is doing nothing at all. And that's why I wanted your perspective, because I think it is important for people to hear that. I mean, they're seeing
Yes.
you're a CEO, you're writing multiple books, best-selling books, and doing amazing things now. But when's the last time someone heard about the things that you just stated, right? Like, I think it's important to reinforce that the beginning isn't. It seems like it's invisible when you see the visible, you see it happening, but all of that led to this, and I
And
don't think you would have got to where you are without that, right?
yeah, and I mean, to be clear, like I gave this advice to an author yesterday, like you can't be afraid of wasting time, or you just won't do stuff. You won't enter the creative process with like the gusto that you need to, and it's much better to believe that every hour of work you're doing is good and important and deserves your full focus. And you'll find out later that, maybe 70% of the hours that you spent were on a thing that doesn't make it into the final product. Like, right? Like the book, I wrote a 600-page version of the manuscript and the final book is 150 pages, 180, maybe 200. Like, but those other 400 pages weren't wasted. They were just, they're sawdust in a way that turns out to be helpful. And I learned going through them, and I'm glad that I did. And it creating the context of 600 pages helped me get to that 200 that was so polished and perfect and great. So you can't be too afraid of wasting time, or you won't do the kind of work that you need to do, or work as hard as you need to. Even in a very like illustrious, advanced careers of people you really respect, you know, they are like quote unquote wasting time from when you look back at how they spent their time all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't know it at the time. You know, startups all the time, like, are like, well, we spent a year on that distribution channel. It's not panning out. Like, was that wasted time, or was that an experiment that you ran based on an informed decision that like didn't work out the way you hoped, but you still learned some stuff? So it's much more important to just build the skill of doing work and producing, and deciding later what pieces you want to publish or preserve or destroy or iterate on or transform. Like something good will come out of it, no matter what you think going in.
Yeah. You have to have some kind of foundation to move from that, right? Like you said, the 600 pages gave you the context to be able to break it down into what was actually valuable or not
Yeah.
even just what was actually valuable, but what people wanted to listen to and really like actually take in. And it is so powerful. There was something that I heard in another podcast of yours, and I really resonated with it. I think this kind of touches on what you said of like people think that they're wasting time, so they don't do anything. Is that you said that you're not more productive because you're stressed. And this is a belief that I think everyone deals with. Many people deal with it. Is like I was listening to Rich Roll and Chris Williamson this morning of like Rich Roll feels like if he doesn't get to the end of his whatever he's doing, and he feel like if he didn't stress, it's not good enough or something like that. When did you adopt that belief, and how has that kind of played out in your life?
Dude, I'm still trying to adopt that belief every day.
Yeah.
I was stressed an hour ago, and trying to remind myself that I wasn't helping. So it's a really like, you know, Naval's got a good line on this. So like, you know, enlightenment isn't some permanent state that you like achieve and maintain. It is, you can be a certain percentage enlightened each day. And you know, that's, some days you do well at reminding yourself that you don't have to be stressed, and some days you don't. You know, comes and goes in different projects and different times, but yeah, I don't think you're ever so good at the internal psychological game that you get to totally take your hands off the wheel.
Yeah. It's a difficult thing to go through, because especially in creative work where you feel like this is like my everything, like you spent 3 years synthesizing everything of Naval's to be able to put it out, and it's like I feel like I would be in like an ambient state of anxiety just going through everything trying to be like, is this perfect? That B could have been deleted too, like the little subtle things where you really have to break it down. What was it about Naval, and what is it about your new book? What is it about the people that you decide that I'm going to go write a book about everything that they've done?
Yeah, Naval was kind of an easy choice for me. I'd followed him for 10 years or so, and I'd learned a lot from him. And it just, I'd been reading Principles by Ray Dalio, which is quite a good book. And he talks about like just wishing that more people had written books like that kind of later in their careers, and be like, here are the foundations of my success, or the things that I learned. And I was like, man, who do I wish had written that? I wish Naval had written that. I just listened to the great episode he did with Shane Parrish on the Knowledge Project, and there was some timeless wisdom in there. I was like, man, I love podcasting, but it's still like tough discoverability, kind of a subculture compared to books, like not quite so timeless. Doesn't like transcend all the generations and all the cultures in the same way. So maybe it would be great if like Naval would write Principles. And I'm a huge fan of all the like Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett books that are compilations largely of their interviews and shareholder meetings and stuff like that. So I was aware of this kind of like weird subgenre where people like built books out of other mediums, and it just kind of like clicked together of, hey, there's all this raw material out there. I've seen good books built out of existing sort of medium before. like maybe there's something here. And so I just like tweeted this idea as a joke, and well, with a joke title, and tagged Naval, and woke up to find that like 5,000 people had retweeted this thing and said like, oh my God, yes, please do it. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I got a project on my hands. And so it instantly went from kind of like, oh, maybe I can kind of squint and see it, to like, oh shit, this is like a real thing. And if Naval is paying attention to it, like I want to absolutely nail it and have it be something that I'm really proud to, even if all I ever did was show it to him, like I
Yeah.
would want to know that it was mastered. Um, and that is a really helpful forcing function to not quit, become an incredible, like have an incredible like craftsman-like attention to detail, um, and just be willing to like publish this thing with your name on it and his name on it, right? Um, so I recommend, like, even if you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, just pick somebody that you really respect, put their portrait on the wall, and pretend like they're looking over your shoulder. And all, if at the end of the day you have to present your work to them and say you're proud of it, and that can do wonders for your diligence and your level of your bar for quality. It changes how you think about your work.
Yeah, even like the standard that you hold for yourself, right? Like
Yes.
the first thing that, when you said that, the first thing that I could think of was like, if I'm gonna run a mile and I have David Goggins on my shoulder, I'm gonna sprint that mile. I'm not taking no shortcuts, right? It's like really taking
Yeah.
that perspective. I think Joe Rogan said it one time where like, treat your life like there's a media crew following you around all the time. Like how
Yeah.
differently would your life be? And every time something's challenging, I think of that, and it makes me just really lean into the thing, because I wouldn't want anyone to see me looking like a fraud. So let me actually hold that standard for myself, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah. It's a helpful thing. I
I'm,
remember
I'm
Arnold
curious.
Schwarzenegger saying he
Go ahead.
lifted harder. He lifted harder when the documentary crew was there, or even when like
Yeah,
the girls come in from the beach, and like when you bring the girls in the gym, all the PRs go up, right? Like it's a useful trick.
it really is, and taking that perspective and multiple different fields is really really important. I'm curious for you, like throughout that time, you took a long time just diving into his work, and I feel like I think of an actor that takes on a role. It's kind of like you did that for someone, but really it's just being able to break down the way that they think about things, the things that they did. What did
Mm.
you learn about yourself throughout that process, though?
Through writing the Naval book.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's a good question. I probably learned the most about myself on the, like, in the happiness side. I felt sort of
Mm,
validated and informed on the wealth side. Again, back to like kind of being raised in an entrepreneurial family. Like I thought I understood
yeah.
largely how money worked and how business worked, and had read a lot of those kind of books previously. And so I was like, okay, I feel like this fits. It overlays. It reinforces the things that I thought I believed there, and it gave me some helpful new kind of words and a very broad principles, which I think is really helpful. The happiness side, I just wasn't as like deeply or well read in the philosophy or the sort of um, the art of owning and curating your internal state. And just him pointing out that you have the ability to control the voices in your head, and that is a trainable a skill, just like anything else.
Mhm.
You can make your muscles bigger, and you can make the voices in your head quieter, and um, that's a knob that you can very consciously attempt to turn in your life, is a really helpful realization. Even have someone point out that there are like competing voices in your head, and that the story that you tell yourself is really what defines your experience as a human. And that's not just this thing that's given to you at birth that you can't change, right? It's been installed in you, and you can choose to uninstall it or install different things. And that's not to say it's easy. Just because it's a choice doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do. But as soon as you start hearing that voice through some, like, you're observing your own state, and
Mhm.
you hear yourself say something that last week you would have taken as reality, and now you have the opportunity to evaluate that statement and be like, actually, that's fucking crazy. Like, that's not true necessarily. I understand how I could get there. I understand that I would have taken that as true a week ago, but let me actually evaluate that and see if I want to keep that or not. And it just slows you down from some of the extremes of any emotion, right? And I think that's helpful, especially if you experience a lot of stress or envy or pressure or negative emotions, right? Like, just learning to evaluate those and dismiss them can be huge for getting through a day with a smile on your face, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is when I went through that, and I when he stated it as like happiness isn't a state but more of a skill, it made me
Yeah.
really change my perception, because it's a fleeting thing, right? And I think a lot of people see happiness as like, I'm gonna get that thing, I'll be happy. Or once I'm done with work, I can get home and I can finally allow myself to be happy. But it's like, no, like it's a skill that you can develop, and when you perceive it as such, and even if it wasn't true, like it's useful. It doesn't have to be true. It's still useful for you. And that
Yeah.
lens in the way that you look through life is really helpful. Another thing that he spoke about was that a desire is a contract that you make with yourself to get what you want, to be unhappy until you get what you want. What for you, like how has that changed your perception of whether it's like even goals, for example? Like
Yeah.
how do you balance that?
So the single first thing I did when I read that was go delete Instagram. Like, it is just like it is just absolutely, it is a desire engine. Like, it is designed to
Yeah.
maximally, just like, as soon as you pop up, keep you hooked, keep you wanting more things, wanting the next, show, wanting this car, wanting that vacation. Like, it's insane. It, like, the impact that it can have on your psychological state is fucking crazy. So the
Yeah.
first is,
It's very
understand if desires make you unhappy, and often they do, that's especially the ones you hold on to or that you encounter often, and especially the ones that are not like true, deep, thick, enduring desires. A desire to, like,
Mhm.
fall in love, get married, have a family. Like, I don't think that's necessarily an unhealthy desire. I'm not saying you
Yeah.
should get rid of that in your life. Um, but and I can come back. There's a good book about that I can come back to. But the other
Nice.
is watching when you install like desires and feeling them like lock in, and you're like, I don't
Mhm.
want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. And then learning to sort of enjoy a lot of the joy in anticipation or in the earning, rather than believing that you will feel fulfilled once you like achieve that end state. And I am now at the point where it's like, I can buy stuff that I know I used to want, and I don't, because I just know
Yeah.
that as soon as I have it, the desire fulfilled is just kind of like, okay. Um,
Mhm.
and so, I don't know if that's, I could also convince myself to like go live a little and like go buy the car or whatever. But there's
Yeah.
something about just learning to evaluate your desires much more carefully and select the ones that you want. And that goes for goals too, right? Like, I, the moments of biggest stress over the past year probably related to me looking at the goals I wrote out for myself at the beginning of the year and being like, I'm not on track, or I got off that one, or I'm going to achieve this one, but not that one. And then thinking
Mhm.
about how much the context has changed in the last 6 months and whether that's even really a good goal for me anymore. But it takes a while to like process that. Like, you still have to go through like, oh shit, I'm off track. I'm letting myself down. I'm disappointed. I'm stressed. I'm behind. I'm like, I messed up. Like, I shouldn't have taken that day off because I, missed. I will be not able to fulfill this arbitrary goal that I set for myself at the beginning of the year. Um, and I'm like, next year, I'm like, I'm not sure I need to set goals specifically for myself next year. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a hardworking person. I've been working my ass off for 15 years. I don't love the feeling of like being lazy or not doing things. Like, it's the odds that I just don't fulfill, like, I don't move my projects forward next year, are very low.
Yeah.
and I'm thinking about just running an experiment of like, this is a goalless year. I'm just going to like basically wake up and make the best decision for me every day about how to move like all of the projects that I have forward, and see how that goes and see how it compares both like outcome wise and subjective, like my feeling as I'm going through the year wise, to this year where I had a bunch of really specific goals that I was trying to achieve.
Yeah, I look forward to like holding you, like just following along with that, because that's something I think would be very beneficial for more people realistically. I mean, at least for like people that are they're ambitious in itself, and so the goal is just like something to attach your self-worth to, or like your what you want is at that, it's like that end goal. It's like once I get there then everything's going to be it, but at least my belief is that the purpose of life is to enjoy the passage of time. And so if I'm always thinking about that last thing, or whatever, like whatever I'm trying to get to, well, then am I really enjoying it? What if I just let go of
Yeah.
it and I just did what I wanted to do, aka like
Yeah.
actually pursuing the things anyway, without doing that? It makes me think of a quote from your new book. Actually, is that we have to start talking more about our values than our evaluations,
Yeah.
and I love that. I love that. I'd love for you to break down, because there's a lot of quotes, honestly, from this book, this new book, that I was going through, and I thought you're able to synthesize things so well that people just need to be able to take it and just actually just sit with themselves and internalize it and ask ourselves these questions. Like you said, it's like we're going through these things without stopping in the middle and be like, do I still really want to go towards that goal?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to get distracted
It's a
by proximate goals. People spend their whole lives chasing something that's actually like only tangentially related to the thing that they thought they wanted in the first place. And it's tough to go down
mm,
all of that, all the root causes of like, why do I want that? Why do I want that? Why do I want that? And the quote that the quote from the book that you mentioned that Balaji said, I think applies to like the tech industry as a whole, right? Like the tech industry as a whole is now talking a lot about fundraisers, a lot about exits, a lot about, big numbers, um, a lot about business growth and goals and B2B SaaS and KPIs. And the value of tech, the like deep purpose, the moral good of technology is creating something that has never been created before and building a lot of it so that it can be distributed very widely so that it can elevate the capabilities and the quality of life for the whole of human civilization, right? It's not about an arbitrary number and making it go up. But I think that became the scoreboard that people paid attention to and people have spent their careers chasing this and forgot about the thing that they really got into it for, like the fundamental thing. And there's stories and parables like all over the place where you'll see characters like go through that.
yeah.
It's just such a common path. It's hard to find the time to like step back and be like, what's really important to me in this and why, and be willing to, swim upstream from a crowd that's still kind of blindly moving the other direction.
Yeah. I spoke with Mark Sisson, and he sold his company for 200 million a few years ago, and it's like it was the happiest moment and the least happiest moment of his life, because it's like at least from my perspective, I see this in like the example for podcasting. It's like, why would I want to stop having conversations with people? Like if the end point is not having conversations with people anymore, I'm missing out every single week. And then like that's what I
Yeah.
enjoy. And so I think it is getting back to, what are you doing what you actually enjoy? Are you actually moving towards something? Like I like to focus on the direction rather than the results. And so that allows me to have more joy in this process rather than so focused on trying to get somewhere. It's like, where are you trying to get to? The whole purpose of life is enjoy what you're doing every day. And when we're so caught up on the goals aspect of things, it's really difficult to be able to surrender to that.
Yeah. If you really dive into the direction and trust, the work that you do each day, a lot of times you'll surprise yourself on
Mhm.
the results. But if you focus on the result, you start to hate the process sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's an unfortunate way to go through life. If you set a goal and you feel like the process that you're doing isn't getting there, but you used to love the process and you don't anymore, like that's shitty. I had Chris Williamson, who you mentioned before, on my podcast a few months ago, and he
Love them.
gave me a great metaphor for this, which was I stopped treating my work as a car ride where I was like white knuckling the steering wheel and like stamping on the gas, and more like a train ride. I'm years into it. We're on rails. The train is going. I can look out the window and we're still going to get where we're going, and I can sort of enjoy what's happening and where I'm going and who I'm doing it with. And I can get up and wander around and take a nap, and everything, we're still moving forward. Like we've given it a big push. We bought the ticket. We're on the way.
Yeah, he's really good at those kind of things. I remember one where he brought up the perspective of the Mexican fisherman parable, the parable of the Mexican
Yeah.
fisherman. And it's like that one is something that resonates so deeply. When you were talking about that, another quote popped up from the new book is many things that are true are unpopular, many things that are popular are untrue. I'm curious for you, like what is a popular opinion that you disagree with?
Oh my God. Quite a lot of them.
Oh, I know.
Is a good is a good way to get into trouble. The whole like middle of the book is really about all the different types of truth and
Yeah,
different ways to
so
evaluate
good.
things. And I thought that was a really helpful framework to break down. Like there's economic truths, there's political truths,
Mhm.
there's mathematical and technical truths. Um, and then all of the ways that the truth is sort of twisted, distorted, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not unintentionally, and just gets lost. And there's that quote is a beautiful summary of the concept of like we are programmed, like it is an evolutionary trait that we tend to believe the thing that is most popular. That
Mhm.
not for like social safety reasons, and like we are consensus building, group mammals, right? Like this is what we're bound to do. But there's a lot of good reasons why the crowd is not necessarily correct. Um, and it really pays, you'll see in a lot of the great careers and a lot of the great thinkers, like a willingness to evaluate where sort of the crowd is and stand apart from it.
Mhm.
Um, Everybody chooses to do that in their own ways, publicly or privately, personally or professionally. And it can be the root cause of some really good things and some really hard things. And you got to, I guess, choose which truths you want to evaluate, which ways, and what direction, what bets you want to place based on it. There's people who spend their whole lives disagreeing with everybody, and they're pretty annoying to be around. And so, like, whether they actually ever place a bet on it is distinct. They just want to argue. And there's other people who, maybe quietly correct, and you may never know. And there's other people who kind of decide in their specific industry how to like put their chips down and apply some leverage on a truth that they see that others don't. And yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I think it really pays to like pay attention to to never take for granted that what is popular is true.
Yeah, I think it's when it's popular, we want to lean towards it because it's the herd mentality, that innate part of our brain that just wants to be a part of, wants to be liked, wants to be seen, wants to be a part of something. And this brings up another quote. Like I said, I'm going to bring up a lot of quotes because there was so many that
Yeah.
resonated. Popularity can't be measured by likes. Or popularity can be measured by likes. Truth can't be. Status is a zero sum game. Wealth creation isn't. And I want to dive into that because I think it goes back to what you just said right there. Like, how can we break through our innate desire for status, to be popular, to be liked, to be seen, and then lean more towards what we really feel aligned with? And maybe that is wealth creation. Maybe that is, something that is just out of the ordinary. It usually is, right?
Yeah. This goes back a little bit to choosing your desires and figuring out what
Yeah.
matters to you. Um, Different people have different sort of innate or learned responses to these things. Like if status is important to you, like I don't think that's bad or shallow or evil or what anything, right? Like there are people who are
Mhm.
naturally prone to that for nature or nurture reasons or whatever, and that's fine. And you can lean into it. Um, I would hope that people can find ways to align their desire for status with the public good and with positive sum games,
Mhm.
not negative sum games, right? or zero sum zero sum games.
Yeah.
I think, when you look at politics is pretty zero sum. There's a noble sort of perspective, which is like good governance really like elevates all citizens, and then there's the zero sum perspective of like there's only so many seats in Congress, and people are constantly sort of like undercutting each other reputationally to get those seats, and that's a
Yeah.
tough way to live. It's a tough way to live, and you want to believe that leaders can see positive sum solutions and find win-win deals. But when you are in a culture or an industry that is zero sum, where there's only so much to go around, or when the industry is shrinking and people are like shivving each other to get a bigger share, you become like you adopt the culture of where you work and what you work in. And one of the things I love about tech is that it's very positive sum. Everyone is trying to do new things, build new things, create new value, and share that. And when there's new value being created, it's really easy to share. Those are healthy systems, and I think a lot more things can be positive sum than maybe are today. Like we talked about education
Hmm.
earlier, and the huge opportunities that exist there. It's difficult to change a culture, and it's difficult to swim
Yeah.
upstream in a culture over a long period of time. So I think the most important, career advice or life advice for young people is like be very selective about the cultures that you choose to enter. If you're a person who
Hmm.
just loves to win and works hard and is diligent, but you go into one of these cultures like maybe a Wall Street culture um,
Yeah.
or a political culture, your talent and your hard work is channeled into this kind of destructive political, um, cut the other guy down to get ahead of them sort of training and mentality that I think
Hmm.
will hold you back from doing business productively with people who are more positive sum, and changes your reputation and changes people's willingness to trust you. So really try to find somewhere that you feel like you can work honestly and productively and build other people up and let them build you up, and that's the spirit of the place that you're in.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring up another quote. I'm going to bring up two.
Bring it
Win
on.
and help win will always out.
Yeah.
Win and help win will always outcompete live and let live. And it's like the synthesize of what you just said right there is
Yeah.
I think we're in a we see life through a lens of competition rather than collaboration. Like we feel like
Yeah.
there isn't enough for everyone. Abundance, whether it's money or talent or fame or whatever we're looking for. I think when we come through that lens, we come from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Like I have to cut this person down for me to succeed. Um, Being surrounded by those kind of people are only going to hurt you. And I think it's really important to be selective, like you said. One thing that I want to touch on, because it kind of goes back to what we spoke about earlier, is that hard work is a competitive advantage. Even the belief that hard work is a competitive advantage is in itself now a competitive advantage.
Yes.
I think that's so important to reinforce, but I also want to challenge that by saying if we believe that hard work is a competitive advantage, that usually leans into like that hustle culture kind of mentality. So how can we take on that belief without putting ourselves in a position to work out of scarcity, as kind of just went over?
Yeah. I think it's the combination of Naval and biology on this is really helpful. Like Naval is not
Yeah.
he's not a hustle culture guy. He's not a like go hit 100-hour weeks. He's really like leverage and judgment, and you'll probably have to work hard,
Hmm.
especially if you have a really big goal, but it's much more important to kind of work smart first. Um, I think Balaji's quote is really helpful in showing that, and this is again like what's popular is not necessarily true. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
who believe that they're entitled to a win and a work like all of the things that they want and a work-life balance, and that they don't have to work hard,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't have to work harder than the person next to them, or that somebody else has the impression that they're not working hard, but maybe they are, and
Mhm.
they're just not showing it. Um, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, in tech and probably in other industries, it's the debate between, hustle culture and work life balance, or can you build a great company on 40 hours a week, or do you need to be working 80 hours a week? And different people have different incentives for pushing different narratives. But if you think like, who would you rather compete with? Like people who believe that hard work is good and are working hard, or people that believe that they don't have to work hard? Like, I would love to compete with somebody who's not working hard. Um,
Yeah.
assuming that I think I can make good decisions, like, or the all other things being equal, like there's no benefit to assuming that you shouldn't have to work hard. Ideally
Mhm.
you can make a few great decisions and you can work smart and you can build leverage, but there's a huge returns to speed and effort. Sometimes non-obvious returns of just people like people who work hard. People support
Yeah.
people who work hard. Um, People like to see other people working hard. And if everything just like falls at your feet without you working for it, like, did you earn it? Do other people believe that you earned it? Do they
Mhm.
like are they willing to work with you because they think you're going to hold up your side of the deal? Um, yeah, it may just be my like Midwestern work ethic, but like that to me, that's a virtue. Like hard work is a virtue and it's a value, and you will get farther in life just assuming that you have to work hard and attuning yourself to that and bringing that to everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so very true. When you were speaking about that, I was thinking of your friend Jimmy Soni. I was in Ohio a couple
Mm,
weeks ago speaking with him, and just hearing he was on stage, and I spoke with him after the fact, but hearing the way that he just goes into hibernation is what I like to call it. And yeah, I
yeah.
assume the same for you, where you guys just go and just that's what you do. That's the intention, is synthesizing people's work and people's lives and everything that you're doing. And I think it's a belief that will serve you. It may not be true, but it's a belief that will serve you. I keep bringing that up because I spoke with Derek Sivers, and he spoke about how like a lot of our beliefs, they don't have to be true, but if they serve you, then might as well take on that belief. And that's a great example of that. There's one last question I ask every guest. It really encapsulates what I want to do with the podcast. And my question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Belief am I currently unlearning? I'm in the process of testing a lot of hypotheses all at once. Um, just like having just sort of added a new job on top of all of the jobs that I'm doing. Um, I may answer soon that I'm unlearning the fact that I can do 4 jobs at once. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm testing how far I can take it. Um, there's a lot of like, I think, hypotheses within each of those. Um, Honestly, the thing that I'm probably working the hardest at is the thing that you brought up earlier, which is just like knowing that you can be productive and happy and hardworking with like a positive, peaceful internal state. Um,
Yeah.
not always making progress, always working diligently, but never feeling too stressed. Um, that you can be incredibly productive without being stressed or pushing yourself. And I think there's a really interesting like they tell professional athletes, like Olympic gold medalists, they don't tell them like run 100% flat out 110%. They tell them to run 85%, and that's actually like they run faster when they're trying to run 85% than they do when they're trying to run 100%, which I think is like a insane psychological
Hmm.
marvel that probably applies to most of our work and what we're talking
Yeah.
about, the trade-offs between stress and pressure and progress and productivity.
I haven't heard that, and that is going to change my paradigm for the way that I move in the world, because that is really insane. I guess it makes sense to some respect, but that's really insane to hear. Um, wow, Eric, I appreciate your time immeasurably. All of your links for your book and everything that you've done will, of course, be in the show notes. Is there anything that you'd like to share?
Um, no, man, I appreciate you having me on. Um, I'm proud of these books, and I'm very excited to see the impact that they can have with people over decades, right? Like these are, I write books that I had wish I'd had, and I'm really, I'm excited to see not just that people, read them and enjoyed them, but that in 10 years I hear from people like, man, I read it 5 times, I listened to it 5 times, and I chose to make very different decisions with my life, and I'm really happy with how it went, and just these ideas being accessible and packaged and clear and useful. I think there's huge value in that. Um, and I think there's huge value in these ideas, and I hope people find them useful and apply them and enjoy the results of that. And as those stories come in, man, I hope I hear them. I'd love to share them, and I appreciate that you are kind of seeing that happen already. That blows my mind. But that's how this whole parade moves forward, is just people trying to serve each other and do good things and look out for the common good by doing work that they love to do and working hard at it.